When they talk about Goan culture, they related it to the hippie culture. BBC did a feature about young Indians preserving heritage because the youth are looking for more purpose, a sense of connection to what they do, and culture brings that. It also becomes a platform for self-expression.
It's a visual delight even before the food begins.
There are easy ways of doing it, there are tough ways of doing it, but I go the tough way just to learn.
The travel actually brings people together, you know, and that's the most wonderful part about the tourism industry.
What do you think mass tourism has done to this place? Hi, welcome to the We Women Project. I'm very excited for the podcast today. I'm here at this legendary cafe, 31st January Cafe, in the old Latin quarters of Punjab. I am going to be in conversation with a very special guest, Maria Victor. Maria Victor is the founder of Make It Happen, which is an experiential travel company, and she believes in community-led travel experiences. So let's see what we have in store for us today. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Ola.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you this morning. So, tell me something about this cafe. 96-year-old?
Well, yeah, it's a 96-year-old bakery. It's named after the street, which is the 31st January street. It's called the Confiteria de 31st Janeiro. And it's named after an event that happened in Portugal.
Oh, okay.
So it's very fascinating, right? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the Portuguese ruled over Goa for 450 years, which is basically it marked the revolt against the monarchy in Portugal.
Wow, how interesting.
And you
How
know that the
interesting.
Portuguese ruled
Wanna
over Goa
sit?
for 451 years. So there's a lot of influences that you see in this part of Goa.
Yeah, I think every nook and corner of these Latin quarters carry a little bit of the Portugal influence, right?
Yes.
Tell me something about, what is experiential travel? What is it that you're seeking to do with Make It Happen?
Well, Make It Happen, is, as you said, an experiential travel company. And what we do is we bring local communities to the forefront of tourism. And how we do that is through story-led experiences. So we've designed experiences like heritage walks, art experiences, culinary experiences, nature experiences, which are led by passionate local storytellers. And on these experiences, you also get to meet local hosts, musicians, artists,
Wow.
right? So it's a platform where travelers get to connect with the local communities and the local culture.
Lovely, lovely. So you grew up here, Maria?
Yeah, I grew up in Goa, in Panjim actually,
Okay.
in an area called Santanes, not too far from where we are right now.
What was your growing up like? How were you influenced to start something as beautiful as Make It Happen?
Well, I mean, growing up in Goa, community celebrations and community interaction was a very integral part of our upbringing, whether it was a local feast, a community festival, a village festival. So, and there's a lot of that in Goa, every little village has their own feast. You will have a harvest festival. You have festivals like Carnival, which were influences that were brought in by the Portuguese, of course. Christmas was always a celebratory time for everyone. And celebrations here were, involved the entire community, irrespective of your faith. So we would all celebrate Christmas together. We would have Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations where we would be invited by our neighbors to have a really nice community meal. You would have festivals like Diwali, and Goa has a very unique tradition before Diwali where we have the Narkasurs, effigies of Narkasur that we
burn together.
One day before Diwali. So, and all of this involved the entire community.
So that kind of was
That
the
all-
seeds of the community.
Yes, because
driven
we
engagement.
always that's how we lived, right? And after graduation, I moved to Bangalore.
Mm.
And I was fascinated by the big city, and growing up in Goa, we were always curious about seeing what was outside Goa, right? And that's what led me there, but to go to Bangalore.
Mm.
But when I reached Bangalore, what actually I started seeing is people started relating to Goa
Mm.
as Goan culture. So when they talk about Goan culture, they related it to the hippie culture.
Mm.
And not many people knew about the very unique cultural festivals that we have here.
Mm.
So the way we live, the cuisine that we eat,
Mm.
it was all about, people thought we
The
lived at the
beaches,
beach.
the parties,
We
the
woke up
shacks.
every
Yeah,
morning
yeah,
and we were
yeah.
partying at the shack.
I can well
That's
imagine.
what everyone thought Goa was all about.
Yeah.
And so that was also something that always
You wanted to shift that a bit with it.
make a difference in that narrative, right?
Right. Right.
So that is also one of the reasons that we thought we'll start this kind of tourism right from our home here, down here in Goa.
Interesting. So you actually have experienced a lot of experiential travel yourself, right? You
Right.
were a travel enthusiast
Yes.
when you were in Bangalore. Tell me something about that period, something about your trips.
So, I always loved traveling. To be very honest, the fact that I went to Bangalore also came in from my travels, right? We had a family vacation to Bangalore, and I saw the city, and I was, very amazed by the kind of possibilities that were there. And that's how I moved to Bangalore. And so that travel bug was always there.
Mm.
And for me, travel was not about, going through a checklist of tourist hotspots or, it was always about going and being more curious about, the culture of the place. What do people actually think there? What are their ideas? What are their ideologies? And that's what actually inspired me to travel. So I started traveling to different parts of India, like Ladakh, where you have a very distinct Himalayan
A
culture, right?
Yeah, every
Of
little bit of our
where
country, I think,
is very
carries a
distinct.
very
And it's not
distinct-
like you can't say India, Indian culture is one
Yeah.
part, but every region in India has a very distinct cultural diversity, right?
Mm.
And I traveled to Nagaland for the Hornbill Festival. And every time I would travel, I would stay in homestays,
Mm.
interact with the communities.
Mm.
Like in Ladakh, I was very fascinated by how the monks live there,
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I can well imagine.
and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
families actually
Come together.
and also have their children, join the monastery,
Oh.
and how that is an integral part of their education.
Oh.
And if you see, there are very interesting values, within Buddhism as well,
Mm. Mm.
which is very different from something that we have grown up learning here in Goa. So
Absolutely.
every place has its
Yes.
distinct upbringing also.
Yeah.
And only when you stay with a family, eat their food, live with them, see how their day-to-day lives work, you actually get an understanding of that. And that in some way also becomes a journey of self-discovery.
Mm. Mm.
Because you
Absolutely.
start questioning your own cultural biases,
Yes. Yes.
your
yes,
own
yes,
life
yes,
choices.
yes.
So I think that is what always fascinated me in travel. And that's what actually,
led you to
led me to come here.
So when
to
did
make
Make It Happen?
Well, I started Make It Happen in 2011. Well, at that time, I really didn't have a business plan or.
It was like a weekend gig, if I'm
Yeah, it was more like a hobby travel club
hobby travel.
where
Okay.
I would connect like-minded travelers and travel over the weekend
Hmm.
or organize. I was still working, I had a corporate job,
Hmm.
and I would organize thematic tours to different parts of India. And these were little longer journeys, sometimes of 5 days, 10 days.
Hmm.
And, and having platforms like, Facebook, then it was mainly
Mm.
Facebook,
Hmm.
was a way to connect with travelers.
Like-minded travelers or get them
Yeah.
to reach out to you.
So that's how it
Interesting.
started initially.
Hmm.
And then gradually,
Should
of
we
course,
move?
yeah.
Yeah. When did you think, this was something you wanted to do full time? This was something you wanted to build further? You wanted to come back to Goa? How did all of that happen?
Well, that is a bit of a journey because
Mm.
I started to Make It Happen in 2011. and we started the Goa project here only in 2015.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So 4 years.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, the idea when I started Make It Happen was always to get into this full time. I was very passionate about the space, and it was all. The why was always to actually build a platform for local communities to showcase their talent. So while it started initially as a hobby travel club, eventually I started doing a bit of tour operation where I would organize more personalized or customized holidays for travelers. And I did that for a bit, where I would organize personalized trips to different parts of India. But
what
then
was that one changing moment? If I have to if you have to attribute it to, this was that moment when I thought, I'm going to make this, a full time, or I'm going to make this my profession.
I think, it was while I was traveling, I said, travel for me was always about meeting people and, sharing ideas and ideologies with the local communities, right? And learning from them. She was my English teacher. So we once I was traveling to this tiny village called Dampus in Nepal. Okay, so it was a trek to this village, and I came across a shawl vendor, who was selling these yakwood shawls. And after a trek of about 2 hours, I wasn't really interested in buying anything, but the shawl vendor insisted that I come and see the shawls. So
this was in Nepal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as I approached him, he asked me to click his photograph. Now I found that a bit unusual because usually locals do. I find it very intrusive when travelers, take out their cameras and start clicking photographs.
Right.
But he asked me to click his photograph. So at that time, I had his tiny point and shoot camera, and I was clicking his photograph. And while I was clicking his photograph, he calls out to his wife, who was weaving the yakwood shawls, and says, "अगर हम दुनिया नहीं देख सकते तो क्या हुआ? दुनिया तो हमें देख सकती है."
So beautiful, yeah.
And his outlook to life actually opened my eyes to the ample opportunities the tourism industry has to offer.
Right.
It wasn't just about travel. Wasn't just about leisure, right? It had a lot more meaning to it. It was a platform where local communities could share stories, showcase their talent, and that's what we wanted to make it happen all about, right? And so that was one defining moment, I would say, which got me connected to the industry in a more profound way, and it went beyond just enjoying traveling, whereas before that was more a personal interest, right? And then it became something more meaningful and more purpose driven.
Your own upbringing of deep community experiences, your will to travel, and then the little experiments that you do, and then culminating in something in Nepal and bringing you back to Goa.
Right.
So how was it homecoming? How was homecoming for you? Should we spend some time at the well?
Yeah.
What is this well about, Maria?
This is a community well, and it was a very important source of water for the community. If you see the area here, there is a hill, right?
Yeah.
And it's called the Altino Hill.
Okay.
And there were a lot of little springs in this area. And that is why it is called Fontainage,
Okay.
Fontainage, yeah. Which means little springs.
Oh, beautiful.
So, I mean, today it's probably not used by the community as much, and it's, a beautiful community space though. You see here, there is a grotto of Our Lady of Nativity, which is, it's interesting that they found the statue of Our Lady of Nativity in these hills. And they celebrate the feast on Christmas evening. Right? So on the 25th of December, and hence
the entire community comes here.
Yeah, the entire community comes here. There is a whole community meal here. There is a brass band performing.
Okay.
And it's a very, they have,
fascinating.
That's why I said, this is a very important part of Goan culture. Having these little grottos, and you have a feast, and you have a community gathering. So you can imagine in every little village, there's always some celebration.
I understand. So coming back to your story.
Yeah.
So that brought you back to Goa.
Correct. So
how was it coming back to your hometown? How was it coming back to your roots to build something?
Well, as I said, right, they are the little dots that actually build, help you build what you're, uh, uh, what you're,
What
you
you're
know,
seeking
what you're
out to
seeking
do.
out
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
And where for coming back to Goa was something that happened in 2015, a few years, into dabbling in the tourism industry. And as I shared earlier, it always bothered me that people thought that Goa was all about the hippie culture. It became the land where people would come here for the sun, sand, and booze. And I really wanted to showcase the real essence of Goa, the Goa I grew up in. And Goa has a lot of heritage, right? From a very strong indigenous culture, with the tribes that actually lived here.
The
Yeah.
colonial influence.
Then there was
that
colonial
happened.
influences from the Portuguese. There were the Kadambas, the Bojas. There was a lot of Indian empire. So there were different cultural layers to Goa, and which was largely unexplored by travelers.
And you might not have explored it that much as a student, even, right?
Not really. I mean, as I said, all I knew was, these were all part of our festivities. But coming, when I started traveling and started understanding about different cultures, it always brought me back to Goa saying, okay, so but why do we do this? Why do we have this custom? You start introspecting about your own culture.
Right.
And so in, the whole journey started, from tour operation, but we also started seeing that travelers were increasingly moving away from fixed itineraries and structured, tour packages, which were basically fast-paced checklist kind of itineraries where you would just cover the key landmarks and attractions of the place, right? Travelers wanted more flexibility and personalization. And while our journeys, to all these places that I traveled to, even when we set up Make It Happen as a hobby travel club, it involved a lot of community interaction. As I said, living in homestays. It was basically the kind of travel that I enjoy. But in this whole idea of packaged holidays, the value of the experience was getting diluted.
Yeah.
It was all about,
been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
Take the pictures, come
exactly.
back. Yeah.
So we realized that in order to cater to this growing demand for more personalization, at the same time to celebrate the local culture, we needed to pivot to a new model. So when I came to Goa, I started building like a community of local storytellers, approaching local hosts, musicians, artists, and instead of actually offering a whole packaged itinerary, we started offering standalone experiences of 2 to 4 hours, catering to different interests. So it could be a heritage walk, catering to a heritage enthusiast, a food trail, catering to someone who wanted to try the local cuisine, art experiences, nature experiences. So we pivoted to a new model where we said we are going to offer only standalone experiences, which will be easily bookable. So the traveler has the flexibility to plan their travel when they arrive in a destination as well.
Understood. So it's like I can come into Goa this morning and decide I want to do one of your trips and book it.
Exactly.
So that's the way you model. So when you talk about these community-led experiences, the locals become a very key part, indigenous part of your tours about your community. How did they kind of respond to this initially? How did they, how welcoming were they to this idea?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you're asking this question as we are standing in front of this beautiful blue house,
right,
where one of our first few storytellers lived.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no more today, but we got a lot of support from, retired professionals, like Alirio, who lived here.
Okay.
And, they lived, that heritage that we wanted to showcase, right? And there are a lot of local stories to tell about how they lived in the area, what was their life
the
like.
Portuguese
They lived during the Portuguese time.
Yeah.
And so initially we had a retired school teacher join us, with Alirio, who was working in the tourism industry and then seen the effects of over tourism that was coming in and wanted to be part of this change. So they believed in the vision, and that's why they really worked with us.
Okay.
And eventually we started seeing, gaining interest from the youth. I mean, initially the youth were a little skeptical about this career option because it was, misunderstood as just being a guide, a tour guide. And in India, tour guides and tourists is not really considered a most aspirational profession.
Yeah.
And we wanted to change that because, if we want to bring high quality tourists, we need to bring in high quality service,
Absolutely.
and we need knowledgeable people to actually share stories of the place.
Absolutely.
And so we started calling, the people who lead our experiences storytellers, because we realized they're doing a lot more than just, giving you basic facts about the destination. It was a way of connecting facts with emotions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And bringing in their own insights, perspectives, and stories.
Absolutely.
And the conversations with the travelers was more of a cross-cultural learning and sharing than just being, I am going to create some awareness about the history of this place.
Absolutely. The storyteller becomes like the key ingredient to
Yeah.
this offering. He's the very key ingredient to this offering, correct?
True.
So, if you can put together what a discovery companion and a storyteller, just if you can bring those two words together and make it, make me understand what it means.
Well, we see travel as the real essence of travel being discovery, right? When you go to a new place, you're discovering a new place, and that's the whole possibility of travel, right? Where and discovery is not just discovering a new site, but also learning something new. And when you go to a new place, you would like to have someone who can show you the way, who knows the place well, who knows the finer nuances of the place, beyond the typical what do you say, beyond the typical
person who can
tourist
just
attractions.
take you to that, been there, done that places. Yeah, okay, understood.
A discovery companion is someone who actually knows the place well, who you trust, right, to offer you recommendations of where to stay, how to shop, where
Correct.
to eat.
Correct.
You want them, they are the ones who become like your local friend in the
Right.
area.
Right.
And that's what our storytellers do.
Right.
We of course lead experiences where we talk about the history, the architecture, we share local anecdotes, and you build a bond with a storyteller who becomes your friend.
Yeah. By the end of the storytelling session, you are a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've seen that,
Yeah,
right?
I've experienced it
that.
yesterday. So that is nice. So how do you so these are local community people, right?
Yeah.
How do you actually groom them to become a storyteller? How do you groom them to become a discovery companion? Like, there can be an artist in the village. There can be maybe a freedom fighter in the village.
Right.
How do they learn to say the stories, or how do they learn to articulate it in a manner that it becomes engaging?
Well, I think, this has been a process, which we've learned over time, with a lot of learnings from the elders, as I mentioned earlier. But we saw that there is a whole methodology in which we can design an experience, and so all our experiences are designed in a way that, we design a script around it. We have the key highlights of what we want to talk about the place. We ensure narratives are very inclusive. They are also, we introduce a lot of multi-sensory experiences within an experience, and we train storytellers to actually deliver this. And in fact, we have a course that we've introduced called Storytelling in Heritage Tourism.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Where we train local storytellers on the art of storytelling.
Oh.
And we've done this not just for storytellers in Goa. We've run this course along with Intact Heritage Academy. And we train storytellers from across the country.
Okay.
And we wanted to see whether we can bring in our learnings to, people who are interested in this field. As you said, there could be a freedom fighter, it could be someone who's done their PhD, authors, and with people from all walks of life who actually joined this course. And we took them through the entire process of how we design an experience, and we got them to design an experience in their own neighborhood.
Oh,
right?
Wow!
It was very fascinating. I mean, everyone had designed an experience of their own locality, so all the participants got to experience different parts of India in that. So there is a whole, methodology to this training.
Right. Is there one story that has stayed with you, Maria, over the years?
Well, I already shared the Nepal story. Another very interesting story. I mean, it's a local anecdote. It's not really, um, something very very close to what we in Goa believe to be, susegado. People talk about Goa
Yeah.
as susegado, and everyone thinks it's laid back or lazy, but that's not what it means. What susegado actually means is a sense of contentment. And so there is this very interesting story of a traveler, who meets a fisherman while he's walking along the beach. And, the fisherman was returning from, with his boat after a whole night, being out there in the sea. And he asked him, what did you catch for today? And he told him about the local varieties of fish. And so the fisherman invited him, why don't you come over and my wife will prepare a meal for you. And so while he was, walking towards the house, he asked the fisherman, so how often do you do this in a day? So he says, yeah, I go early in the morning and, I actually go into the sea in the middle of the night and I come out early in the morning. And it also depends on the tide and the time of the day. So he says, how many times a day do you fish? It's like once a day. And this is the fish you catch, and what do you do with it? He's like, we prepare the fish that I require for the family. The rest of it is sold in the local market. And he's like, but if you fish more than once a day, you can catch more fish. So he's like, yeah, but what do I do with that extra fish? He's like, then you can, sell it to the markets around, not just your local market. Goa is a lot of villages, which you can go and sell your fish there. And he's like, then what do I do? He's like, then you'll make more money. And then you can have one more boat maybe, And he's like, and then what do I do? He's like, then you can, export the fish to other parts of the world. He's like, and then what? He's like, you'll have a whole team. They will be going fishing. You can, sit here and manage the work here. And he's like, and then what? He's like, then, you'll have all the money in the world. You can retire. You can come back and live your life the way you want. But he's like, that's exactly what I'm doing right now.
Got it. Yeah.
So that's the story that actually stays with me. And whenever we, when we actually do what we do at Make It Happen, we always ask, is this something that you would want to do even 10 years from now, once you have all the money?
Right.
And if this is exactly what you want to do, even when you have all the money, then this is what you should be doing.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. 2-3 times in this conversation, you've mentioned how the perception of Goa was not sitting with you.
Right.
The perception of how people viewed Goan tourism was not sitting with you. So can we now just move into Goan tourism as such?
Right.
And what do you think mass tourism has done to this place?
Well, I mean, it has actually, if you see the coastal belt, it has completely ruined the whole ecology there, right? The beach belt itself is supposed to be a very eco-sensitive area. But the kind of tourism that we build, which is around the shacks, the booze, the parties, have destroyed that ecosystem, right? So, and along with that, there's also been cultural dilution. Right? As I said, everyone now relates to Goan, or not now, but at least a few years back, related to Goan culture as, the hippie culture.
Very honestly, this is the first time I'm experiencing this type of a Goa. I mean,
Right.
if I might put it that
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
So many people, still do not know that there is this side of Goa,
Yeah,
and that's why the work we do still has a long way to go, right? And so there has been this mass tourism has put a lot of environmental stress. It has led to cultural dilution, and also exposed locals to social hazards, right? Like safety, noise pollution, right?
A lot of those elements. If you had a chance to kind of redesign this from scratch, what would you do? Where would you start?
Well, I think that's exactly what we came here to do in Goa.
Right.
To redesign the way tourism is done.
Right.
And in fact, I think, to a large extent, we have made a difference, because back in the day, if you would go online and start looking for things to do in Goa, you would find the parties, you would find the water sports, you would find the beach activities. But today, if you go online and search things to do in Goa, you will see a heritage walk as the number one thing to do in Goa.
Very nice. That's so lovely.
Yeah. So that's where, the narrative had to shift, and that's the work that we've been doing.
So the number one thing that comes up today is a heritage walk. That's really lovely to know, Maria.
Yeah.
I think then the nudge has started.
The nudge has started. We're seeing a lot more interest from even the industry, because when we started this, it took time for even the mainstream tourism industry to actually see the value in what we're doing.
Right.
Where
Right.
it came to established players in the tourism industry, where tour operators, hospitality brands, and I think that shift happened because first the travelers' behavior was shifting, right? And we had to enroll the traveler first, and which we did through communication on social media, a lot of media attention also we got for the kind of work we're doing in reviving a lot of traditions, preserving culture. So all of that really helped in building this narrative. It wasn't like we could do this alone. It was a very collaborative effort.
That's lovely to know. So two things I wanted to check, kind of pick your brains on. One is, you've been covered on the BBC, you've been covered by the Condé Nast. So I want to know what they wrote about you. One was that, and second is, I think over the last couple of years, you've been getting a lot of travel awards.
Right.
Right. So tell us something on both those angles.
Well, I think for all these media channels, what was most interesting was it was a very unique approach to tourism, which brought communities to the forefront, right? As I said, and it wasn't about the tourist attractions, right? And if you see, tourism was evolving, and in the West, it has already evolved to a large extent. In India, we are still catching up, right? In terms of bringing in more community participation in tourism. So I think the community participation was a very integral part, which got a lot of
people
attention.
appreciated you for it.
People appreciated it. From your story featured us. Then BBC did a feature about young Indians preserving heritage, because there's also a trend now where people are increasingly becoming curious about their own heritage.
Right.
They want to learn a lot more.
We live in that time.
In that time. So and at the same time, there is a lot of heritage that is getting destroyed, right? And that's basically because heritage is not being viewed as an economic asset, which actually it is an economic asset that local communities inherit.
Absolutely.
And what all we're doing is creating a unique model where through storytelling we bring life to heritage. So BBC wanted to cover that story. Then of course Outlook Responsible Tourism. While there are a lot of initiatives that talk about sustainable tourism, what we managed to do is create a scalable model, which is both collaborative, right? And it kind of brings authenticity, right? It is not about just numbers. It is about meaningful impact. Like the communities that we work with, the local hosts that we work with, do this not just as a livelihood, while it of course it does provide
there needs to be
a livelihood.
passion.
There is a certain passion, there's a certain pride in the culture, and people in India were looking for something like this, and I think we just happen to
I think it's a lot of, again, coming together that happens, right?
It's a lot of coming
timing,
together.
the community, the way people perceive tourism overall. You brought a very valid point about youngsters today being more aware about their heritage, about wanting to own it up with a lot more pride, right? So, and there are a lot of influencers, bloggers, all of that happening in parallel.
Correct.
How do you think they can participate in this journey?
Well, I think
or are they already?
They are already participating to a very large extent, right? When we put out posts, like we did a post recently saying we're looking for storytellers, and we had people from across the country actually apply, saying we want to be part of this journey in some way. So I think today it's more than the youth have gone beyond just earning. They're looking for more purpose, and and they were looking for a sense of connection to what they do, right? So and culture brings that. Culture gives you a sense of connection, a sense of belonging, and that is why I think the youth today are increasingly interested in culture and heritage. Yeah, so I think that's what, and there are various ways in which they can, be part of this journey. Of course, work with us as storytellers, and it also becomes a platform for self-expression, a very important aspect in today's lives, right? Where you actually discover yourself and are able to bring out that passion that you have.
Yeah.
So they work with us storytellers, content creators, social media content creators, influencers are there, and they're looking for interesting stories. And we are all about stories.
Right.
We spend a lot of time researching about places, history. We interview locals. We bring local perspectives through our host. We work on, showcasing different crafts, traditional crafts of the place. And without a platform, many of these art forms would die.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's why there is increasing need for such enterprises. Not just us there. And there are a lot of initiatives in different parts of this country. But I think, there needs to be a place where they can showcase this. And that's what we aim to do, be that platform. So, from being, a company that designs experiences, we are now moving to being a platform now, where anyone who wants to be part of this journey can, join us, design experiences, host. We've launched something called as community events. So if there is a festive celebration and you would like to host a few guests, you could do that as a one-off event as well.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So we are creating new ways in which we can bring in more community participation.
Interesting. So this place we're going to is also one of your hosts, is it?
Yes.
Who
So
works.
It's a lovely couple, Edith and George, and Edith works in a bank actually.
Okay.
They're very passionate about hosting people, and they've seen our work in Fantainesh for a while.
Oh, okay.
And then they approached us saying, okay, we would also like to be part of this journey.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
they host us here in this house which they live. And they also have another home not too far from Panjim, and a place called Kujira, where they actually host an experience called the Susegada Goan Soiree. It's a new experience that we put together where you get to spend an evening, with the Goan family, like both of them, and they, Edith shows you how she prepares a soup, and then George shows you how he makes a feni cocktail. So it's just about spending time like meeting a friend in their home. Hi, George.
Hi. Thank you so much for hosting us today. Good
So
morning.
here's Vilasini is here to
Come to We Women Project. Slippers are okay? Okay. Pleasure to meet. Yeah, I did.
We meet again.
Yes, we just met for Christmas. We meet again.
Thank you so much, Edith. I
Welcome. Most welcome.
like I was just mentioning, it's a visual delight even before the food begins. And thank you so much, Maria. How do you know each other? How did the whole thing come about?
Well, we've known the family for a while. In fact, we first met their son, Declan, and Declan had joined one of our food trails very early in the days when we started. And he mentioned he lives in the neighborhood, and of course, the concept was pretty new. And so we said, okay, whenever you all are ready to host people, please, we would love to have you all, as part of the experiences that we put together. And I guess Edith is actually still working. She's a branch head of,
Fabulous. I don't even know how you manage it all.
I've just got one here.
Superwoman.
Yeah. But as
Yeah.
you can see, she has a very artistic side to her. And, they reached out to us last year saying that, now we're ready. I think, both of them had time on hand with the kids,
Moving out
moving
and
out.
you're becoming empty nesters.
And-
Yeah. This is a beautiful place. 200 years old.
Yeah,
The property?
house is approximately around about 200,
Yeah.
a little over 200.
Mm.
So
And you've grown up here.
I have been born.
Brought up.
I had a wonderful time in this area of Mumbai,
Mm.
and now we are taking a lot of advantages of this place,
Mm.
and it's like people like Maria, who has brought out this opportunity
Mm.
for us to enjoy.
Mm.
We are really enjoying ourselves.
That's so wonderful to hear. That's so wonderful to hear.
So we meet people, such wonderful people from around the world,
Mm. Mm.
and that opportunity would not have been there if Maria and Murli were not around.
I think we should bring Murli into the picture right now. So
Yeah.
Murli is co-founder of Make It Happen. Yeah, and Maria, you want to say something about Murli? It's
Well, yeah, I mean,
spotlight back on you.
I think, Murli and I met in 2015 while I was traveling. So I shared about, the travels that I was doing around India. And I was with a group in, doing a tour around Laol Spiti Valley. And this was a place called Chandratal. So we were staying there. And Murli was doing a motorbike tour, a solo trip on his motorbike around the Himalayas. And he was on a sabbatical from work,
Oh, wow.
which was quite interesting,
Yeah.
a 3-month sabbatical then.
Yeah, 3 months sabbatical. So for me, the idea was to explore a little bit of the Himalayas, and I thought I'd take my time with the Himalayan states. And the plan wasn't really set in place because I naturally was a very slow traveler. I would take a lot of time. Wherever I would travel, I would say if I want to visit a village, I want to stay there for a few days and explore. See what the communities are up to and what they do, how they live, and so on. So that was my style of travel, and that is something which is very
Very similar to
the
what
way Maria was
Maria
already,
was looking at it.
already taking the groups in with slow thematic journeys. So that's something which really, I would say,
Attracted?
immediately clicked
Yeah.
and attracted the way the work was happening, and I was all very passionate about travel as well, and that's why I decided to take that leap and get into the experiential travel, which is the the vision of Make It Happen. And Maria came up with that idea, so that's how I ended up being part of this whole movement since 2017. Joined as co-founder, and it's been a lovely journey. We got married in 2019,
Beautiful.
and of course then there was COVID and all that. We will get to that part
Yeah.
later, but
Yeah.
but it's been a lovely journey. So and it's been a great journey meeting people.
I know hosts like this,
John
I think,
Bennett,
just kind of accentuate
Yeah.
the beauty of this whole.
I mean, where we would amalgamate together. It's only this. Otherwise, you just go around your work schedule. Impossible.
Totally, yeah.
And if you guys hadn't started it, I wouldn't have been here from Bombay having this breakfast in this 200-year-old house. So
So travel
thank
actually
you so
brings
much.
people together,
Yeah,
and that's the
yeah,
most wonderful part about, the tourism industry. If you look at tourism industry from that point, it's so beautiful.
Yes.
It brings people together.
It brings people
It
together.
does, yeah.
And it gives experiences that you can never imagine. I think I wouldn't have in my wildest of dreams imagined this breakfast today. So I'm looking at the food. You want to explain what's on the table?
So this is the regular bhajis which you would get at any of the restaurants.
Okay.
It's the staple food you can say of the breakfast for Goans.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
This is there for ages.
Vatana chana bhaji,
Hmm.
which you will have for ages in all the Goan restaurants. Which there is no caste, creed, anything for this. Everybody
Okay.
enjoys this.
Okay.
It's a very
This is the
staple
potato bhaji,
Hmm.
potat bhaji, what they say.
Hmm.
And this too. So these two are the very staple breakfast foods for anybody who's Goan. They go with local pav, basically with a local pav, also with puris and chapatis.
Okay.
But this is the most sought for in Goa.
The local pav is
Yeah.
like the and I think because I'm a vegetarian, a little bit of a bummer on this breakfast table. I didn't.
Oh, but actually, breakfast in Goa is largely vegetarian.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
With the exception of eggs sometimes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is generally
In fact, how did the Portuguese amalgamate into the Goan's society? Otherwise, the Portuguese have got a Western outlook. But when they came to Goa, they grabbed this. You know what the local population of Goa really strived on, the bhaji and even what do you call that?
the
The mirchi. Yeah. Wow.
So,
That's delicious.
That's why Goa was looked into in a different outlook altogether.
Yeah.
It was
I think the fabric itself of Goa is very unique.
yeah.
Yeah.
Our
it
main
has-
breakfast is this.
Oh, okay.
Anytime you go, if you don't get it at home, we rush to the restaurants. to eat it.
I may not be making it every day at home, but on a Sunday after Mass, if you go to the restaurants, your local ones, they are full of our people after Mass. We just,
Okay.
this outbeats any Western food.
Oh, okay.
Breakfast in Goa.
Interesting. I didn't know this either.
Yeah,
Lovely.
so you help yourself.
Thank you so much. Wine.
No, you
Nice.
please.
So this is in Mumbai. You have the missile, right?
Yeah,
So
we
this
have the
is-
missile. This looks like a
is-
close.
Yeah, this is
Not a
quite-
very close sister, but something close.
Missile comes from Ratnagiri side.
The
The
Ratnagiri.
Konkan.
So I think, the Goan Chittagong Ratnagiri, that must be the way missile traveled.
Because
To Bombay
missile
as
you
well.
get from there, you don't get anything.
Yeah.
Traveled a lot. The Suki Bhaji.
Can I serve this one? Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Only I can't reach you.
He let him
Please
start.
charge myself, please.
So what's very interesting is we have the potato bhaji, and which is a very integral part of cuisines across India. But potatoes were introduced to India by the Portuguese.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So
Oh.
and even
Now that you say it, I think I've read it somewhere. Yeah.
There's lots of things which are introduced by the Portuguese. One is potatoes coming from out of India, right?
but it came by the Portuguese introduced it to India.
To India, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The other one was cashews.
Yeah.
The
Cashews.
was brought by the Portuguese
Yeah.
from Africa. And even till today, what we get from Goa, the cashews, they are only the small little local shops like Zandi's and all. They got the original Goan ones. 80 to 90% are coming from brought from Africa or something in big bundles.
That's
is
a
it?
great.
Oh,
Some great.
thank you. Thank you so much.
This they call pound.
Yeah, I know. I know
is
this
undo.
also.
This is
Yeah,
undo.
the harder
version
one.
of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Undo
I
or some called
actually love
pokshe.
Pokshe, no?
Yeah.
Pokshe are those.
This
Are they
they call
yours
unda
split?
only. Yeah, I don't mind actually. Thank you.
And this is the kokum.
This is kokum.
This kokum juice is made by her.
Wow.
Usually the
This is
fruit,
the concentrate.
the fruit is arranged from my brother-in-law's farm.
Oh.
They're the border of Goa.
Oh.
So they have got so much of it that it takes 4 sackloads or something and gives it to her.
Wow.
And she
And
prepares
you
the
make it
kokum
for
juice
the family.
for the
then?
entire family.
Wow. Wow.
You don't get a lot from 4 cyclones. You get some bottles, say, I could count maybe around 10 liters. But
Where does this passion come from? Like, to
that's
host, to serve. Like,
No, basically, I love to go by traditions which have gone by and have not been in vogue anymore. You need to go to a shop to buy that gives me more challenge than, okay, you don't get this anymore, I want to try it out.
Oh.
Yeah, so I enjoy doing that. And that led to so many things. things.
Okay.
That's all. So even this brindav, we call it brindav. We wouldn't do it. I don't think my mom ever tried doing this. But when I got married here in my neighborhood, I found everybody doing it. So I immediately picked it up, and I can go through 10-15 recipes and then end up coming the one which I am comfortable with.
Oh.
Amalgamate the whole thing. And I keep learning. That is the main thing. It's not that I am expert in anything what I do, but I keep learning things.
But this is amazing
Yeah.
because every year I
And
keep saying.
this year it came to use because we started hosting. Otherwise it was self-consumption.
Maybe I need to make it happen in Bombay because I keep saying I'm going to revive my grandmother's pickled recipes, and I haven't done a thing about it. So this is inspirational.
Yeah,
I'm going to
so
take this back.
Wow.
So
This is what I try doing because whenever I see something is dying out and you need to reach for that to a certain. There are people who do. I appreciate a lot of people who still will go through all this hard work for doing. Even after they come around. For Christmas I did that. So that's a very tough thing. There are easy ways of doing it, there are tough ways of doing it. But I go the tough way just to learn
how it was
how
done. How it was done. That's
The
amazing.
only thing I miss out is in doing the bibinka in that form which his mother used to do.
Tell us about the bibinka.
So bibinka also, I have never done it in my house and mom never did it. My mom was good in something called batika. So I raised that also. But bibinka was a challenge for me because
What is bibinka?
bibinka is a layered dessert.
Okay.
Yeah, like how you would have pudding a full one. So this is a baked dessert which is layered, which is made with the yolk of an egg and coconut milk. Yeah. So there's a story behind it that is brought. I think Maria can tell you the story. Yeah, it's brought by the nuns, and they had used the white of the egg to starch their
Clothes.
clothes,
Uh-huh.
and then they didn't know what to do with
The
the
yolks. So they made
So
a.
they made a dessert out of it.
It has a GI tagging
Yes.
right now. I
Yes.
think. Yeah.
So then it is baked in layers. So the old way is that it should be baked in 7 layers, but now people go up to 12 and 13 and 14 layers. But I feel the best part of it is you have to need the patience to do that. So it is an art. It is an art to do it. Even if you have the patience, sometimes if you don't know how much to bake it for, that also spoils the whole thing. I don't say that I am a great maker, but I do try my best in getting it done the way, and I still to ace it. But it's thanks to his mom's recipe. I follow this bibinka in my house was initiated because of my husband.
Oh, okay.
He used to remember his mom's recipe so much. He says, one thing I need you to do is learn from her how to do it. And so one day we sat by, but as old people, as in the previous generation, they don't have any written recipes.
Yeah, it's all from the
It's
mind.
all from the mind.
Yeah.
So that was a tedious job for me. I used to sit and measure. So sitting I had to pull it from my hand. So it's not that accurate, but we love the flavor of it. They love the flavor. They can identify the flavor. And so every time I do it, if I change to the regular way where it has to be so systematic and so beautifully laid out, then immediately these people, they fail me.
What happens is when a bibinka is made, we know the original taste of the bibinka. That original taste should not change. Now, the moment when you go make it commercial, then things start. You look at the beauty of it, how even it is, how everybody says, "Oh, this is better than that."
The layers.
The
come
layers.
The layers.
very
So bibinka can never be very systematic.
Not about the perfection.
It's not
Perfection.
perfection. If you want the real taste, it has to wave around. Somewhere it will become polo.
Katmala with mud.
That gives a unique taste. So all that comes into this of bibinka. And she fortunately has not changed it. And
I tried changing, but it doesn't allow me. So
we don't eat anything because we are diabetic.
Okay.
But during the Christmas time when she makes it, the entire bibinka, even the others don't eat, it will finish within say about 7 days with us.
I can
And,
imagine.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
So
that's
beautiful,
unique.
right? Our cultures and what we carry
What we
over
get, yeah.
generations.
And
So
she
this was
said,
made in the forn.
in the form,
is
form
a
means
mud.
earthen pot.
Oh.
With fire down.
With you can see the coal down inside, hot coal. The first layer is done with the coal inside. Then once the first layer is done, and then you put the coal on top of the
Yeah.
earthen pot.
So it has a
Layer by
smoke
layer,
flavor,
layer by
is it?
layer.
And it has the layers on top. So you cook it from the top.
Mm.
So what we do in the oven now is we bake it first and then we use the griller.
Ah,
That's how it goes on.
okay.
It's a very tedious job.
Mm.
That's why we sat
Yes.
down. We spoke about sitting till 2 o'clock in the night. Is because I come back from work and then I start that. So it goes on till 2, 3 in the
So you've
morning.
been
long
doing
process.
this alongside your career. It's not like, it's
No,
always been
it's just a hobby. It's just a hobby. I
Wow.
enjoy doing
Wow.
Christmas sweets. That's all.
So
Whatever
my
is
mother
possible.
used to start in the morning
Mm.
doing that in the earthen pot,
Mm.
and she used to finish it off at 12 o'clock in the night.
Wow.
So that amount of time
Time
used to
it
take for the
takes.
heat.
Mm.
And then
Slow
she used
cooked.
I used to be in charge of overturning it,
Mm.
tasting it,
Mm.
cutting it. And that she doesn't say how many hours? 6 hours in the oven.
No. It takes me 6 to 7 hours at least.
8 hours.
It takes around 20-25 minutes per layer.
Mm.
Basically.
Fascinating. This is very good food. Thank you. Thank you so much for the effort.
So I always believe that there are these recipes which should not be forgotten.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Absolutely.
And doing it the traditional way is very important.
Yeah.
So I make an effort. I
Are
don't
you
do
now
that.
documenting it?
I
Writing
want
a-
to do it. I have not got the time, but I always keep telling my daughter tells me, Mama, let's sit and document everything.
Mm.
Because fortunately, she's also interested in
Mm.
all the ways of cooking.
Mm.
So she tells me like we should sit and document all these things before it's
Yeah.
Lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
first
Absolutely.
lost.
But I think, practicing it is also very important.
Mm.
Yeah.
You have to master it.
You know, that's
Yeah.
big, big, big.
This is what he corrects me all the time. He says, you have to make the binga at least 10 times in a day. I said, because that's why it goes wrong.
Like the bread was something that the Portuguese introduced, and it wasn't part of Goan cuisine.
Mm.
And if you see
Yeah.
it was something that they introduced in the southern part of Goa. In a particular community called the Shardor community.
Okay.
And they are the ones who started making bread. And that's how, today, even if you see the pound that is there
In many parts,
In
yeah,
many parts.
Bombay lives on power.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's actually something that was again introduced by the Portuguese. Again, the Mumbai itself was, at that time, Bombay was given as dowry by the Portuguese to the British.
I was just about to say that Bombay has so much influence, at
Yeah.
least in the food. Culturally, we've moved away significantly, but food is a lot,
Lot of similarities.
Yeah, lot
right?
of sim-
With the Portuguese, Bombay was part of the
Hmm.
Portuguese colonial powers,
I think a whole day is not enough, Maria.
Yeah.
I'll have to just sit and redo my history from scratch. It must have needed so much upkeep.
Yeah.
It must have, and you've given it that love, and it
Yeah.
shows.
And it's not only us, even in the past.
Mm.
What happened, these houses were bought by us. In the
Hmm.
past, others also lived in them.
Mm.
So everybody has given his pound of flesh for these houses.
Mm.
So like we are fortunate to be there. I was fortunate to be born and brought up there.
Mm.
So after that, it will not go anywhere.
Mm.
So that's the beauty of it. The only thing which we have about these houses is the large.
Yeah, the
space.
ceiling.
She was
The
just
ceiling, I
mentioning
was
that.
just mentioning the ceiling outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the spaces. Now all these houses are available in say in all the coastal areas where you get these beams and magno tiles on top,
Mm.
right through.
Mm.
But usually they don't cover it.
Mm.
They don't put a false ceiling.
Mm.
Yeah.
So here they have done one step ahead, like put the false ceiling in. And if there is no light around, like in these two rooms, we are attached. This is a common wall
Mm. Mm.
with the other house.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the other side there is a passage. Every house has got a passage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here all along you have a house with a common wall,
Mm.
and then you have
We
a
have a
passage.
passage on the other end. Okay.
So that passage has a window with no light coming in.
Oh.
So the light comes from the top.
Oh.
So
Oh, yes. Yes.
so that these two rooms now which are there, they have a opening up, and they have the mango tiles. The mango tiles are similar. You have these, glass mango tiles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's six
Yeah.
of them above this room, 6 above the other room, And that's what gives the light. So we don't have to put on the light during the day.
Wow.
It is all thought through, right? The architecture.
So this is architecture not from Portugal.
Yeah, it is Goan.
It's Goan.
Absolutely.
It's very good. Even the
Every,
materials.
I think in every field, right, the level of depth that is there, whether it's culinary, whether it's architecture, whether it's mind blowing. I think,
And who had these, artistic themes were the Indians itself
yeah.
in the past.
Artisans. Yeah.
Now, if you see where in Europe and all they got the artisans, the artisans used to come from the east.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened here also. The artisans used to come from North Goa. The carpenters and all those special people who do art.
Like if you want carving work to be done, now of course it's common everywhere, but in those years you had to go to the interiors of Goa, like the North Goa, Pedne. They're famous for doing this kind. Masonry, you want mason carving, you get there. I think the carpentry was from Benali and that's
Not only from the south. And from the north, it used to be
pockets
from,
in Goa
Which actually specialize in
families used to do that. Like
Families.
carpenters, if you want artists, then you get charis.
Correct. The Chari community is known for
Chari.
sculpting work. Even the churches, they've done lots of amazing sculpting.
Yeah, that's
Great.
Yeah.
and that is why you
Yeah.
see a lot of influences, in the churches as well of Indian architecture.
Yeah.
Actually, they'll slip in one of their own,
Own
traditional
little-
designs.
own little creativity
They look very
here and
interesting,
there.
actually.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Now we do that.
The thing is that they used to do the temples. The temples look
Yeah,
beautiful.
the
all
churches
over.
also.
So the same artisans did our churches also.
That's why you can see that. Yeah.
Little Western outlook, and this mixed culture came into being. And that brought advantages for Goa at least. So we are looking at it now. Before in the past, we used not to even think about this thing.
Yeah.
Another way of life.
Way of life. It's
Yeah.
just amalgamated existence. Beautiful. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a wonderful meal. And thanks for being such lovely hosts. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you.
for coming over.
So, Maria, what a lovely breakfast experience that was, right? So, thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for that. Like I was just mentioning, I wouldn't have ever dreamt of such a destination experience. So, are immersive experiences, the core to destination tourism?
I really think, these kind of experiences build narratives for a destination. And if you see through experiential tourism, a destination goes beyond the key attractions and landmarks. You can have micro destinations, through experiential tourism by focusing on different aspects of a destination,
Absolutely.
whether it's history or whether it's art, whether it's music, right? So each aspect actually brings life to a destination. And so it stays as a living landscape rather than, something that has, that is fixed.
Just
or,
historical or just has past value.
Yes, it's no longer, it's not just historical. It's not about, a few landmarks. So because when you once you've gone through a few checklists of landmarks and attractions, in India we say we're done with the destination.
Yeah.
Right? So you say, oh, I've done Ladakh
Yeah.
or I've done a place. Whereas when it's experiential tourism, that's not the case. It's a living landscape.
Yeah.
Destination stays alive in the eyes of the traveler also, because there's always something new to come back to.
Absolutely.
And that's what Goa is. If you see, when Goa was known only for the beaches, during monsoon, tourism would come to a complete halt. Right? And it would be
Yeah.
off season.
Yeah.
But today you have different reasons to visit Goa. You can come to Goa for the heritage. You have quaint villages. People enjoy the village life in Goa. There are homestays that have opened up. The food scene here is amazing. I mean, of course, there's a lot of local cuisine, and there are a lot of efforts to revive traditional recipes. As you've seen today, Edith was talking about how she's reviving, some of the recipes that have been handed over from her mother-in-law, generations, right?
Yeah.
As well as there's global cuisine in Goa today.
Yeah.
There are restaurants, serving
Catering to every nationality. I would
every
think.
nationality.
Yeah.
So it's becoming a place that you can always come to and find something new and discover.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's become an all year round destination. So that's what experiential tourism does to a destination.
Absolutely. How do you choose your hosts? How does that come about?
Well, as I said, it's, as you've seen today, we were talking to Edith and George. It's a relationship that you build over time. It's a trust that you build with the community. And it's a very collaborative approach in the way we work, where it is about bringing in the expressions of the community, right? So if, all that we need is for the community to believe in the vision, that this is a platform for them. It's not a platform, to commoditize something.
And safety also, right? So you'll have to look at the safety for the host. You have to look at both ends. So what are some of the watch outs that you have when you choose? So on both ends.
On both ends, right? So on the host end, I said, it's about a relationship that we build with the community. It's a factor of trust that they believe in us. Now, from the traveler end, it's something that is even more tricky, right? Because you have people from all across who are coming into a destination. How do you filter that audience? And we can't really say, oh, I can screen you before you come in. Right?
Yeah.
So, digital platforms have really helped us. In fact, our website, we receive most of our bookings from our website, and there we are able to clearly communicate what this experience is about. Right? And what to expect, what are the inclusions, exclusions, what are the do's and don'ts. All of that is clearly articulated in our website. We use social media platforms for creating awareness about a destination. So we've always been about storytelling, and that also attracts a sort of discerning traveler. It's not about an activity or an attraction. While there are a lot of trends that come in, it's very important to stay true to the
core belief of what strength of what you are wanting to build.
Exactly. And also, we do not follow a deal based model. So we don't give you deals and promotional offers to come and book this experience. So it's something that only if you're really interested in it. And we always tell our hosts, it's a privilege for the guest to meet you.
Absolutely. I mean, I so echo that, but yeah.
Right? So even our storytellers, when they're trained, that's the training we give them. It's a privilege for them to meet you. So this whole concept of, customer is king and we need to do whatever the customer wants is not something that is part of our core beliefs.
DNA.
Yeah. And our DNA in the way we build experiences. It's about staying authentic and staying true to the experience and the local culture, and people who appreciate it come to us.
Understand. How do you then scale? I mean, how does this? It's enormously rich. So don't get me wrong with the question, but it's so rich. It's so deep. It's touching at the grassroots. How does this build?
So, I mean, when we started this in Goa, it was always, while Goa is a place I grew up in, Goa is home. The idea was to build a model that can be taken across India. As you've seen, from Murli and my travels, we have traveled across India, and we think that, all of this needs to be part of the stories that we tell, right? We want to celebrate India. And so we started putting in systems and processes. We have a methodology to which we design experiences. We have a training module.
Like you were mentioning, the storytelling.
And we have like weekly trainings for storytellers. So they're continuously learning, right? So, but these are all systems and processes that you can put in place. And both of us come from very different backgrounds. I'm a chartered management accountant. Murli comes from the gaming industry. So it's not necessarily based on the knowledge that we have. We are not the historians or the experts in the history of the place. It's the communities. These are stories told by the communities. All we do is give them a framework to work within. So this framework that we've built in Goa can be taken to any other part of India. And we've already done this in Diu. During COVID, we were invited by Diu Smart City to set up heritage walks in Diu. And Diu was a completely new destination for us then. And we set up we set up 3 experiences there in a span of 3 months.
Wow.
Right? And we did everything from researching, designing the experience, recruiting and training storytellers, to the branding and promotion of these experiences.
Wow.
Right? So all of this was something that we took on. If you see, we've done a beautiful logo for them. We did videos, that can responsibly communicate what the experience is about. And the idea then, for having us on board as part of the Diu Smart City plan was to actually narrativize Diu as a destination rich in culture and heritage rather than being in just another beach destination.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then it brings in a better quality traveler who's appreciative of the local culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where do you think India is going wrong in its tourism?
Well,
are they going wrong, or where do you think they're going wrong?
I think, tourism in generally, I can talk about Goa and a few other destinations in India. And I wouldn't say all of India is going wrong. There are great examples of tourism models in India. But the ones that are not doing so well is because there isn't a planned tourism policy or even a strategy. Right? So, let's look at Goa. Goa, had the hippies come in the 70s, 80s. And then you had, because the hippies were coming in, the Indian travelers started coming in to see the hippies. Right? And then that's how it built. There wasn't really a plan on how we're going to manage capacity, which are the destinations we're going to open up. It happened very organically, in
a particular manner.
In a particular manner, right? And we just went with the flow. And that's why, we face the brunt of over-tourism. Whereas now, and this has happened across India, but some destinations have taken time to actually, rework that.
Can you give me some examples?
So if you look at Kerala, Kerala was facing the brunt of over-tourism, but sometime in the late 2000s, say about 2007, 2008, they said, okay, let's focus on responsible tourism. And then they started saying, what is responsible tourism? So they started bringing in more community participation from women collectives, opening up homestays, showcasing the local cuisine.
Sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability. Right? And it only happened because the communities took ownership of that.
Yeah.
And the communities participated in that.
True.
So I think that's one great example. And of course, they're positioning as God's own country. How beautiful is that, right?
Yeah.
But there are several other destinations. If you look at now Nilgiris, we were talking about Ooty. Ooty has also faced the brunt of over-tourism. Yes. But now they're taking corrective measures.
Yes.
Like, there is a ban on single-use plastic in the Nilgiris.
Okay.
You can't carry a plastic water bottle. You have refilling water stations everywhere, and you can get water from your hotel room, but you cannot carry a plastic water bottle there.
Very nice.
Right? They have marked eco-sensitive zones where you can't have any plastic. Like even a food packet cannot be a plastic packet. They give you brown paper bags and say, if you want to carry your food along with you, you can actually transfer it into this
and take it.
Brown paper bag and take it, which is very thoughtful. It's not like you're not giving you alternatives.
Yeah.
So, there is, of course, a lot about enforcement, but I've seen them enforce this at, forest checkpoint. So there are ways in which they are actually enforcing this as well.
Very nice.
And again, the communities take ownership.
Yeah.
I think one, you can say, there is policy enforcement by the government, but there has to be an equal amount of community participation.
Community participation to save their own surroundings to their own. Beautiful. That's wonderful to know. From a make it happen perspective, where are you? What do you see the future to be?
Well, as I said, this is a movement to celebrate Indian stories and to bring communities to the forefront. That's always been what we've been about. And we have now, we've already set up in Goa, we've done Diu, we're already in Bangalore, and the aim is to take this across India, to start with 20 key locations that we have identified across the country, where we think, we can bring in the shift in the way we experience a destination. Right? And of course, it's a lot of work, but the frameworks that we have put in here is something that we look at replicating in these other destinations.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank
you so
That's
much
good.
for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have interacted with you. Thank you for all the experiences. I've seen Goa with fresh eyes
I'm so glad.
over the last 2 days, and I think it's all thanks to you and Make It Happen.
And thank you for having me on this podcast. It really helps people understand our journey.
Yeah,
and
it's been fascinating for me.
And it's also you help us in this journey of, showcasing a different side of Goa, and hopefully now all India soon.
All the very best.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to that. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to yet another wonderful episode from VWP. It gives us enormous pleasure to create this content for you. If you enjoyed listening to the conversation, please hit the subscribe button and do let us know your favorite moments from the conversation. We would also love to hear if you have any guest recommendations for us. Of course, please don't miss our shorts section where we have our favorite moments compiled in bite-sized formats for you. So keep listening, keep growing, and do subscribe to the We Women Project. This is your host, signing off. Thank you.